Hello, this is Cheryl and Claire. Welcome to neuroTRYvergent, an experiment in living and working without the mask. It's a podcast where we discuss navigating career change and just existing in the world as a neurodivergent human. I'm Cheryl. I am an ADHD adult moving from being a professional nanny to a positive discipline trainer and a parent educator slash consultant. My co-host, Claire, is a late diagnosed AuDHD adult and founder of Wizarding Way Career Path Mapping. Her business is a combination of career coaching for neurodivergent folks, plus e-courses and workbooks. Each week, we pick a topic and talk about the initial thoughts, the pros, the cons, and the balance of each concept. Starting with the second episode, we will check in with the 2-week challenge experiment from the past episode. We will each share experiences in 2 minutes or less and invite you to share your experiences in the comments or find us on our websites that are linked below in the description.
Excellent. Thanks, Cheryl. I'm so happy to be here with you today for this.
Right.
And we have a topic today that I both love and hate, and that kind of fits into our structure here. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it. And that topic is, I feel like I should do a mini drum roll, perfectionism.
Ooh.
So let me just start with a few initial thoughts on perfectionism, and then I'll pass off to Cheryl so she can give her initial thoughts, and then we'll go into the pros and cons in a little bit more depth. So I really wanted to call this topic blowing up perfectionism. So that tells you a little bit about how I feel about it from the get-go. Um, Blow it up. It's a trap. It's a trap. It doesn't exist. Um, Yeah, and I could say a lot more, but I think that's where I'm going to stop, and then I'll go into depth later. Cheryl, what are your initial thoughts on perfectionism?
Yeah, I think my initial thoughts on perfectionism are a bit of the same, where it's like it's it has great ideas, right? Like it's got this idea of like goals and what you want to happen in the future and hope, but that's not what it is. It's just masking as that, right? Like it's just pretending it's that. Perfectionism is, yeah, goalposts that are constantly moving, is kind of how I think about it. And yeah, I like the way that you described that it's a trap. So
It's a
yeah,
trap.
that's kind of how it feels.
Nice. So let me kind of go into some of the pros, right? And I love how you really kind of primed me for this, right? And your initial thoughts. It's kind of this thing, right? Like it's really easy to just say, "Oh yeah, it sucks. It's a trap. Don't do it." And at the same time, part of my brain says, so just side note, because I have to side note a lot. So part of my autistic brain is that immediately when I go to say something, it will provide all the counter arguments to what I'm about to say. And when I was a high masker, I would just shut all that down and not say it. And now I'm in a place where I don't want to do that anymore. It's not healthy for me. And so it's sometimes really hard to just go forward on a thought because immediately I'm getting the counter arguments to everything. Having a like systems brain, conceptual brain. And in this case, I think it's really good because what made me think about that and want to share that with you is that there's got to be something good about it, or it wouldn't exist. Like things that have no payoff or no benefit to, I mean, in theory ourselves, but we can also like to someone wouldn't, I don't believe would persist. And I don't believe would continue to be around. So you used a word that I wouldn't have thought to use. So I just want to start there, and that was hope. I never thought about that. So I gotta think about that one a little bit more. Um, but I think that the reason why this like ideology is so prevalent, because I really think it is, I think it's very much almost the norm. When you're thinking about like posting on social media, when you're thinking about putting yourself out into the world, creating materials, I feel like in talking with other professionals, it feels like the norm. It is prevalent. And I think that the good intentions behind it are coming from a place of integrity in some ways, right? So it's like I want to do it well, So the most generous version of this is I want to do it well. I want to do high quality work because this shows that I care and this shows that I'm committed and this shows that I value this work, right? And then we could go off on some other things about like I want to do it well because I care what people think of me and there's all this other stuff there, right? Or it feels like my image, but for me that stuff almost goes into the con area.
Mhm.
So I think I'll just stick with I I think the good side of it, or the pro here, is what you kind of already mentioned, right? Is that there's an intention of quality, right? Or there's an intention of uh, showing that you care, or that you really took the time to do something well. So,
Yeah.
what would you say, Cheryl, about why do you think this exists so much, or what's kind of the quote unquote pros of perfectionism?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that was it, is just like, uh, you know, I was working in another program and it was like, what is this? One of the things that they asked for each of the topics that we do is like, what is this doing for you and what is this doing to you? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I have this perfectionistic streak for a reason and it does something for me. Right. And I'm going to read a poem in cons because it has a lot of stuff in cons and I think it just goes there. But like, it's like, it's hope and goals and like this hope that you can be something bigger than you are. Like you can reach this, goal, like this lofty goal. And like, I don't know, if I'm not going for perfect, I have an idea of what perfect looks like. I don't have an idea of what almost perfect looks like. Right? So like I don't understand like what am I gonna, I'm not sitting here being like, what am I gonna if this what does this podcast look like if it was absolutely perfect, everything went perfectly. I have some kind of concept of what that looks like. If everything almost went perfectly, it's like there's a billion different iterations of how that could look, right? Like maybe the sound is off, maybe this is off, maybe that's different, maybe this. And so it's so much easier for me to aim to perfect and fall short of that than to be like, what does this look like? It's just, as someone who's very goal minded, it's it's a it's a useful, the things that the pro is about it for me is like, I think like you were saying, the quality, like you hold yourself to a high standard. You have an idea or a dream or something that gets you motivated to reach it. Um, and then the perfectionism, the ism part of it is being obsessed with that, right? Like being that's like that's what you believe in, that's what you're aiming for, that's what you're going for. But yeah. I think it's a really interesting idea. And yeah, I think hope, it's close to hope somehow. Like in that it's like I can be something more, I can be something better, I can be something bigger and grander or something like that. But yeah. So
Nice.
I think those are my pro thoughts.
Yeah, I'm gonna go right out from episode one. I'm gonna go off script. Not that there's a script, but I'm gonna go off of
Yeah.
format because I'm like super compelled to ask you a question. So, but
Yeah.
first, I there's something that I must share with everybody. I need to light my Saint Picard candle, right? Because I just found what you said, Cheryl, very engaging, right? Saint Picard, engaging. So I'm gonna light this candle. I have lots of candles, so maybe this will be a thing that we do.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm curious to know. So what you said about the like I know what perfect looks like and like I have this hope and this like energy around that and d- so I feel like that's a very common thing I hear from a lot of the ADHD folks that I work with.
Hmm.
So my first question to you is like do you feel like do you feel that's true? Do you feel like that's a part of your ADHD-ness, or is it just a part of you as a whole, or is there a connection there for you or not?
I think so. My imagining is that by being differently wired, um, we kind of, and let me just speak for myself. I kind of like had an idea of what perfect was, and I'm not saying it's a true idea, but it's an idea of what perfect was, and it was not forgetting stuff and not and being organized and like like I think that those goals are a lot clearer for a person who can't reach them in the same way other people can.
Yeah. Yeah. How I relate to that is like those like societal standards about what you're supposed to be doing is much
Yeah,
clearer to
yeah, yeah.
people that aren't me because I don't freaking know, and so I think like, yeah, there's like this, okay, if I do it the very best I can, maybe then I'm actually going to fit in, which
Yeah,
never worked anyway. So
yeah,
okay, thanks. I could keep asking you questions. You're so interesting, but let's go on.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
so we'll get back to
Yes, this is
cons.
why we're doing this. So
Yeah,
cons, for me, um, I think the reason why I am so anti perfectionism is that when I go into that way of thinking, when I go into that way of thinking that whatever I am like creating is my happy space, whatever I'm creating must be perfect, um, it shuts me down. It's because immediately then that that part of my brain I was talking about will say, wait, that's not possible, or that's too big, or like it's just like the threshold then just goes so far up, like the initial like even getting started becomes almost impossible for me. And in a past life, I feel like I've had a couple different lives, but in a past professional life when I was a teacher, middle school and high school teacher, I this is one of the number one things, one of the number one. Does that even make sense? Anyway, one of the most common things that I experience with kids who wouldn't even just start, you know, they wouldn't even start at anything. Like it didn't matter what the activity was, or especially if it was something where they had to produce a product, right? It wouldn't even start because it needed to be perfect in their minds, right? They had already learned that, and it couldn't be. So why should I even flip and try? Kind of thing. And so, and I'm not saying that they necessarily could sit down and tell me that, but the ones that we were able to process what was going on, like that was almost always the reason to not
mhm.
start, and that makes me think back to like perceptions that you were talking about, perceptions of laziness and perceptions of this and that that just are wrong, right? Like they're wrong. There's other things um, going on there. And I feel like for me, it also takes a lot of the joy out of something. Um, and where this blowing up perfectionism is showing up the most for me right now is in like my Substack writing and my posting. I it is joyful to share thoughts and ideas. It is joyful to make a thing and share it with the world. Um, Social media, is that joyful? I don't know. It's like a little tinged for me, and it's a little hard. And so if I have to do it perfect and it's already a little hard, and I feel like this thing that I love is going to be judged, of course I'm not going to do it, you know? And so yeah, so that's the cons for me is it puts up a barrier um, to getting the thing done. And then it also makes me think it feeds into this worldview that there's this standard. You got to look a certain way, you got to do things a certain way, you got to show up like you're supposed to show up, or we don't want to talk to you. So your
Agreed.
turn.
Yes.
Your-
So let me really quickly. I'm gonna read a poem that I had written because, like, I don't know, just ever since we kind of talked about this being um, our first kind of topic, it's just kind of crept into my brain, and I've been kind of mulling it over, even just subconsciously, I think. And so I wrote this poem because I felt like it just really got to the crux of it. Um, and just had to like sit and write it down. All right. So we are the makers of dreams, churned out in factories, purified fantasies, unblemished by reality, pure gold poured into mold, molded after hope, but only a fragile shell to put up on shelves, to remind ourselves what we will never be, eternally disappointed in our accomplishments because they can never live up to our potential, a future we'd never see, too specific to ever be, but we had to believe that we could achieve if we manufactured if that manufactured thing with flip. Oh, let me start again. But we had to believe that we could achieve if that manufactured thing with feathers were to ever leave, would we grieve or be relieved? So that's kind of like got at it for me of like, it's made in the shape of hope, but it's so specific and constantly moving and something we'd never be, that if you like aim for that all the time, you're just constantly running and there's no end. Um, it's, and I think, and like the idea of like, would we grieve? There is some grief if you're letting go of perfectionism there, because there's an idea of like what you wanted to happen, what you wanted to be, what you thought you could do, what, you know what I mean? Like all of these different things, we've talked before about how you have all these ideas and some of them you just have to let them go. Um, and there's a grief moment in there, right? Like and so I don't want to spend all of my life constantly grieving these different perfection idols that I put before me. Like that's too exhausting for me. Um, and it's just, I put it up on the shelf. I kind of worship this whole idea, and then what? Even if I were to get there, even if I got it, like, what would it do? It would. So, yeah, I think changing one of the things I would like to do is just change from perfectionism being my motivator to something else, because I
Yeah.
think it's a big motivator for me if I have a thing to look to. But yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
You just kind of did what I was going to ask you, which is great, which was like, what are your like any thoughts coming up after this reflection? And that was, I heard that there, right? Like shifting,
yeah,
right? Shifting from this being what you were aiming at to something else. And I first of all, I love that you shared a poem. So if you don't know this about Cheryl, she's a writer and she does have a book of poems out there, and maybe you'll find that. Highly recommend. Um, and I love that love that you had to redo part of it. I was like,
yeah,
yes. And like that's a shift, right?
yeah,
Because what we would think is, oh gosh, we should go back and record it and do this and edit and blah blah blah. No, like that was like the most perfect thing that grow up. I just said that. That was the best thing that could have happened, I think, in that
yeah,
situation, right?
yeah,
Because you're like demonstrating your own journey. And I just keep thinking about like acceptance and letting go of perfectionism. I'm moving towards a greater acceptance of
yeah,
who I am.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, I really like that. Um,
Okay, so I think that so part of my brain, and I'm actually trying to reprogram this part, but is time obsessed and is always thinking about time. So I think for today, I'm gonna say like, all right, we've done our thing, we've gone through all this, and let's kind of close it out and talk about these experiments that you referenced in the beginning. So um, thank you so much, those of you that have watched this episode of NeuroTRYvergent. I hope that there's been something there for you and that you'll keep coming back and share your thoughts with us. Based on what we've talked about today, this week's challenge experiment, I think, is going to be focused on recognizing and calling out perfectionism in our day-to-day lives. So by calling out, I don't necessarily mean like in a negative way, right? So Cheryl and I are going to do this, and we encourage you to do it as well. So we're going to start by writing down a phrase that you can say to yourself that I can say to myself when I notice it happening. So step one is just writing down a phrase, put it on a post-it, put it somewhere that you can see it, put it in your phone. Um, so when you see it pop up, you just say this thing to yourself. Now, it's very important that this phrase be kind and compassionate. This is not an opportunity to beat up on yourself for not being perfect.
Mhm.
That would kind of be the opposite, right, of what we're trying to do here. So start by writing the phrase that you're going to say. Next, we're going to choose one small action that we will do when this happens. So, for example, my phrase might be, um, oh gosh, and I just lost it. My phrase might be something about like, oh, that was perfectionism. Check it out. Or look at that. Just more of a like, and then the thing that I might do is I might go and write down what that was around, right? So I can kind of like identify patterns of where this is coming up for me. So maybe that was around a posting, or maybe that was around talking to somebody, or, just make a little note. So you can pick anything you want. What's one small action that you're going to do when you say this phrase? And then this is only a 2-week experiment, so don't overthink it. You're just going to see what happens. What happens if I do this for 2 weeks? And then lastly, especially if your brain's anything like mine, it's not fair to ask it to remember all of this. So the last step that we recommend is recording your observations on how this went. Again, this is a judgment-free zone. This is just like you're almost like you're an impartial observer, right? You're an alien. I like that one, right? Just like watching and being like, oh, very interesting. And then the subject, did this. So you're going to write down what happened, um, and then come back. See us next week. See what happened for us. Compare what happened for you. Share it in the comments. Um, if you are interested in additional structure for this process, I do have a Wizard's Way experimental mindset process document that can walk you through this. It is free and it is on my Kajabi site, which is going to be linked in the description. You don't need it, but if that helps you kind of understand what I'm asking you to do, please go download that. Um, yeah, so that's our challenge for the week. Cheryl,
Excited.
where can they find more about you and learn more about your work?
So in the description, I'll have a link to my website, and that'll link you to my book of poems, what I do with work, all of that kind of stuff. And my email, how to get in contact with me. So go there and find me.
Great. And you can find me at wizardsway.mykajabi.com. Again, I'll link that below. And then I show up on Substack and social media is at Wizard Claire. And again, we'll link all of that down below. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.